Good evening, this is Mr. Wintermelon. So for the chapter thus far, we have been studying system in human and how we human react to changes in our environment. In the next two chapters, we are going to start with system in plant. So in this chapter, we are going to learn about plant nutrition. For this video, we are going to start off by learning more about photosynthesis, which is something that you should be familiar with in your primary school education. But first of all, let me start off with this question. Where does the tree obtain all its mass? Is it from the light? Is it from the air, water, or soil? Pause for a moment and think. Where does tree gets all the material it needs to grow from a seed, a small little seed, to such a great height? If your answer is light, it is incorrect because light is just the energy. If your answer is water and soil, it is not exactly correct. Water may be a small part, but where does the tree obtain most of its mass is from the air, specifically the carbon dioxide that is found in the air. So the learning objective of this video will be you need to be able to state the equation in both words as well as chemical symbol for photosynthesis. Symbol means chemical equation. Then you will also need to state that chlorophyll traps the light energy and convert it into chemical energy for the formation of carbohydrate, as well as how does the plant use the carbohydrate that it produces. The carbohydrate in question is, of course, our glucose. Wow, surprise. So now, let's take out your notebook and copy down the definition of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the process which light energy is absorbed by chlorophyll and converted into chemical energy. Wow, surprise. It is already stated in the learning objective. So the energy that is converted into chemical energy is used to synthesize glucose from water and carbon dioxide, which is why I said a little bit of the mass comes from water, but mostly from carbon dioxide. And oxygen is released as the waste product during this process. Next, you will also need to copy down the word equation, which is carbon dioxide plus water in the presence of light and the help of chlorophyll will give you oxygen and glucose. So in exam, if they ask you to write the equation for photosynthesis, please remember to write the light, especially light, as well as chlorophyll. And the chemical equation is 6 carbon dioxide plus 6 water molecules will give you 6 oxygen molecules and a glucose molecules. The trick into remembering this chemical equation is you just have to remember that glucose is a C6 carbohydrate. C6 meaning that there are 6 carbon inside glucose. There are also C5 carbohydrate, C3 carbohydrate, okay? But what you are concerned with for O-level is just this C6 glucose. Once you remember that glucose consists of 6 carbon, the hydrogen and oxygen is actually quite simple because the ratio of hydrogen and oxygen is same as water. H2 and O. That means there's 2 times more hydrogen than oxygen. So there's 12 hydrogen and 6 oxygen. For the left-hand side of the equation, 6 molecules of carbon dioxide is there to supply the 6 carbon molecules for glucose. Then 6 molecules of water as well as 6 molecules of oxygen. So the oxygen here comes totally from water. It does not come from the carbon dioxide. So In primary school, you might have a misconception of, oh, the plant take in carbon dioxide and give out oxygen, so the oxygen might be from carbon dioxide. No, that's not true. The oxygen actually totally comes from the water, which you will learn later on. Now, for your mind to be blown, right now you can write down the equation of respiration, aerobic respiration. So write down the equation of aerobic respiration and compare respiration and photosynthesis to see if you can see any similarity between aerobic respiration and photosynthesis, these two equations. Maybe your mind will be, oh wow, I never expect this to happen, or I never thought of it this way. Okay, moving on. So now let us look at an overview of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a multi-step process. This one not very important. You just have to know that, oh, many steps, in which light energy is absorbed by chlorophyll and converted into chemical energy. So this is like the third time we are mentioning this. The chemical energy is then used to synthesize carbohydrate from water and carbon dioxide. This carbohydrate is of course our glucose, and at the same time oxygen is released during this process. But just a small note, oxygen is released before the glucose is synthesized. So this slide is more for your info. Photosynthesis involves two distinct sets of reactions, the light dependent stage as well as the light independent stage. The first stage, of course, it requires light. Second stage, light is not involved. And like I said, this slide is really more for your info. You can see some or a lot of chemical reaction going on the right hand side of the slide. If you are interested, you can read up more on this, like what's pyruvate, what is NADPH, Kelvin cycle, we will mention a bit, but it's not important that you know the name. But why am I introducing you to light dependent stage and light independent stage? Is for you to compartmentalize your learning. That means so that you have a rough idea of the stages in photosynthesis, and this will help you have a easier time in remembering or understanding photosynthesis. In the light dependent stage, there are two key events that occurs. First of all, light energy is converted into chemical energy by chlorophyll. This again, I think, is the fourth time that we are mentioning this. And the second key event is photolysis of water. So the word photolysis, right? Photo, that means light. Lysis, if you move up in your biology education, you will come across this word lysis quite a lot. Basically, lysis means cut. So photolysis, that means use light to cut the water. So this is exactly what photolysis is about. Light is used to split the water molecules and releasing the oxygen in the process. And since oxygen is released, you will of course get hydrogen, but it is hydrogen ion instead of hydrogen molecules. So you can see that two water molecules is used to split into one oxygen molecules as well as 4 hydrogen ion. The oxygen is released, and this hydrogen ion is important for the next part of photosynthesis. So just remember, during the light dependent stage, there are two key events or two important events that the light play a role. First is light being converted into chemical energy. What the plant is going to do using this chemical energy, we will find out in the next slide. And this requires chlorophyll. And light is also used to split water molecules for us to get 4 hydrogen ion. The oxygen that is released is just a waste product. For the light-independent stage, what you have to know is it is an enzyme-catalyzed reaction. Whether it's 13-step or not very important. The important thing to take home is it is catalyzed by enzyme. So it is sensitive to temperature. And the name is called Kelvin cycle. Of course, you've seen Kelvin cycle earlier on, which I said not very important for you to know. But if you want to Google, it's easier for you to Google. And the key event that takes place down here is the chemical energy harnessed from the light stage. Remember, light is being converted into chemical energy by chlorophyll. This energy is used to reduce carbon dioxide with hydrogen to produce glucose. So this word reduce might be new to you, but it should be a very common term that you might see in chemistry. Reduction reaction as well as oxidation. In the simplest way that I can explain, but not 100% accurate, is oxidation. Oxidation is the addition of oxygen molecules into a compound or molecules, while reduction is the adding of hydrogen into a compound or molecules. So basically, reduction of carbon dioxide means hydrogen is being added into carbon dioxide. And of course, it is 6 carbon dioxide. Therefore, we will get the C6 glucose. So to put the light-independent stage in animation, chemical energy from the light stage is being used to reduce carbon dioxide with the help of hydrogen, and water is produced to form our glucose. As simple as this, chemical energy from the light stage plus the hydrogen from the light stage is used to reduce carbon dioxide for us to form glucose. This entire cycle is catalyzed by enzyme, so it is sensitive to temperature. It is temperature dependent. So to summarize the light stage as well as the dark stage, first we have our chlorophyll, then water is being delivered to the leaf where you can find chlorophyll. So light come over and it will split the water molecules and oxygen is given off. At the same time, chlorophyll will convert other light energy into chemical energy. So this chemical energy is used in the dark stage, whereby with the help of enzyme, it is used to reduce the carbon dioxide, and this will give us water as well as glucose as a result. So to put this in words, during the light stage, light will be converted into chemical energy, and light is also used to split the water molecules into hydrogen ion as well as oxygen molecules. The oxygen molecules is released while the hydrogen ion as well as chemical energy is needed for the dark stage. So during the dark stage, hydrogen ion is used to reduce carbon dioxide, and this will give us glucose. And to combine these two equations together, we'll get the equation below. So the equation below you have actually copied down, but now you might notice that I have cancelled out the 12 water molecules on the left hand side and replaced with 6 water molecules, as well as totally cancel out the water molecules on the right hand side. For simplicity purposes and not to confuse people, we normally will cancel out the water molecules on the right hand side. The reason being is because the input is 12 water molecules, but the output is only 6 water molecules. So in fact, there is no net gain of water molecules. Photosynthesis actually uses water molecules. So to avoid confusion, which will make people think that water is produced during photosynthesis, when in fact actually 6 water molecules is being used, we generally will take out the water in the equation. So if they ask you to write the equation, you just have to write carbon dioxide plus water in the presence of light will give us oxygen and glucose. You do not need to write the water molecules at the end. So now that the plant have produced the glucose, what does the plant do to the glucose? So the glucose, of course, it can be directly used for respiration. Then in the daylight, when there's more than enough glucose, the glucose is being converted into sucrose. So the plant will transport this sucrose to the organ whereby they store their food, and the sucrose is being converted into starch. Why they need to convert glucose into sucrose first is because sucrose is a non-reducing sugar, glucose is a reducing sugar. Glucose is basically more reactive than sucrose. Since the plant spends so much effort to produce glucose, it does not want its food to get into unwanted relationship with other molecules. So it converts glucose into sucrose, non-reducing sugar, so less reactive, and transport the food in the form of sucrose. And after it reaches the storage organ, sucrose will be converted into starch. And at the night, when the plant is no longer photosynthesizing and it needs some night snack, the starch will be converted back into glucose. And of course, this glucose can react with nitrate. Nitrate is basically make a gas, molecules with nitrogen, as well as mineral salt to form our amino acid. This amino acid can be used as amino acid or is used to produce protein. That's why some plants, such as soybean, is full of protein. And of course, the plant also needs fats, and the fats can be formed using the glucose produced. So for carbohydrate, the glucose is used for respiration, as well as they can be used to make into cell wall. Sucrose, on the other hand, as mentioned, is used for transportation purposes as they are not as reactive as glucose. And after they are transported to the plant storage organ, for example, root, it is being converted into starch. Now, some plant does store glucose in the as starch in the leaf. So glucose can also be directly converted into starch in the leaf instead of being transported to, let's say, the root. But of course, all parts of the plant or all living cell in the plant needs glucose. So glucose is definitely transported in the form of sucrose to other parts. But whether it's for use of other parts of the cell or as storage, different plants have different plans. For amino acid, they are being used as building block for their protoplasm. That means parts of the cell. They can also be converted into protein for storage. So the protein can be used to build other protoplasm as well as enzyme. For fats, they are also used to make part of the cell. Do you remember these molecules? It is the phospholipids bilayer of the cell membrane. Or they can be used for storage. So some seed or nuts are full of fats, such as almond, macadamia, peanut. They are full of fats. So glucose can be converted into fats to be used as a form of storage of energy. And lastly, fats can also be used for respiration, but of course, it requires them to be broken down into pyruvate. If you remember where you saw the pyruvate earlier on. And this will be all for this video.